Welcome back, everybody, to The Climb. The SC2 podcast focused on the below masters blue collar leagues. I am your host, Will, aka Lord Cranial.
Hello, my name is Dan. I go by Captain Hoppa. Each episode, we will dive into the ups and downs of the Diamond Ladder experience while searching for those secrets to get good.
We're just two normal players who are just working on climbing to that next rung of the ladder. We hope you enjoyed the discussion today.
Today's topic is MMR, or Multiplayer Matchmaking Rating, and how this measures your skill as a player. I'm really looking forward to this topic because I think it's a juicy one, and I think this discussion can go in many different directions. But before we dive into that, I have a question for you, Will.
What's that?
How's the ladder been treating you?
It's been treating me better, honestly. I I actually had a friend pull me to the side because he saw that I've been struggling a decent amount on ladder recently. And him and I played a couple of customs. We wound up putting together what I've been kind of doing wrong. I've been focusing a lot on the more flashy stuff. And so what I did is I basically took a step back and started kind of focusing more on just like basic stuff, like literally going back to like 101 classes. Like we're looking at supply block timing, saturation, we're maxing out at a certain time. Like literal, gold level stuff.
Sure.
And it's actually been helping a lot. And the weird thing was is that I've been doing some uh for those of you who know me, I've been doing some music theory stuff on the side recently. And one of the big things that people were talking about is going back to those basics and relearning them because you kind of pick something up new every single time. And I started realizing that's kind of the case whenever, I go back and I relearn those basics. So now I'm not I'm not quite back to where I was before. Like I'm not at 3.7 or 3.8. I'm still kind of hovering around the 3.6 area, but I feel like I've been doing better by going back and relearning these basics.
Can you give me an example of some of the flashy stuff you were doing? Also, by the way, this is like the most Terran thing I've ever heard, but it makes sense.
It's,
It
I
makes
mean,
sense.
yeah,
I'm
it,
guilty of that sort of stuff too, as well. So it's not, but it's also just like, yeah, I'm sure that Reaper had some sick plays before uh, you got supply blocked.
yeah. So, um, a lot of the flashy stuff was kind of like, I wanted to be like hitting multiple places at once. I wanted to constantly be harassing with Widow Mine drops,
Sure.
just constantly being in my opponent's face and trying to get stuff done. But what that wound up doing was I was constantly getting supply blocked. I was actually shocked because my SCV production was suffering, and that hasn't happened in a while. I'm usually
Sure.
pretty good
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
getting 75.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like a lot of the stuff like the Widow Mine drops, like regular drops, trying to constantly be in their face, trying to constantly get damage done, and all of that has been not necessarily hurting me, but it was just time to go back to those basics and kind of relearn and reacquire those skills so that I could do the flashy stuff again.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think the flashy stuff feels like very distracting, you know? And I think this is a very common thing. Like, for Zergs, it's like, yeah, make mutas and then waste 80% of your game microing those mutas and then killing like two queens and being like, oh, right. Oh, wait, I have nothing at home, or like I've done nothing else. It's a classic thing, and there's always that trade-off, and it's challenging. What's the experience of just locking down the macro again? How's that feeling like in the games?
It's it's always kind of weird going back to those basics, because you do kind of have, I don't want to say apprehension. It's somewhere between apprehension and disgust, but it's just kind of like, yeah, that's stuff I learned in Gold League. I don't need to go back to those basics again.
Yeah,
But I went back and studied up on it, and I started just doing like 2 pushes all the time. And
Yeah.
the games were actually going pretty solidly. Like I
Yeah.
was just focusing on getting that max out, getting 2-2, and then just pushing across the map and killing opponents. And it feels like it's been a while since I've been able to do that, honestly. I
Yeah.
mean, most of the time, whenever I'm, doing the flashy stuff, it takes, 11, 12 minutes to max out.
Yeah.
And, I'd be losing stuff with the flashy stuff, getting supply blocked. So it feels pretty good to just, push and kill people.
Yeah. Just roll them over like a steamroller, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, siege tanks literally pretty much are steamrollers. So,
Yeah. Well, I also think like I've had that sort of experience too, where it's like uh, I learned this last year, or before. I learned this a while ago, so like it's automatic now. I don't need to do it. But then you look at your replays and you're like, well, maybe maybe we should revisit it because it's again in StarCraft where there's so many things that are like automatic and also not automatic. It's tough sometimes when those priorities shift, and sometimes you don't even realize it. You know?
yeah,
Um,
it really helps to go back to those, like, even if you're, fairly high diamond level, it feels like going back and just kind of reworking those skills is it's an incredibly important part of your game, especially if you're going to be a macro player. Um, and sometimes you start learning other things, and you kind of start to get a little bit cluttered. So yeah, going back to those basics, it's refreshing in a way. Honestly, it's
yeah.
really refreshing.
Well, I also think it's refreshing to win games like that where you're just like, yeah, I have more stuff. Because it's also very decisive. You don't have to worry about like transitioning or changing your unit comp or anything like that. You're just like, yeah, no, this is enough. um, okay, here's another question for you. Are you having the same amount of fun not doing the flashy stuff?
Oh, I don't want to admit this to myself, but
It's okay.
it's a different type of fun, honestly.
Yeah,
Um, like I don't want to say that I don't have fun doing the flashy stuff, because I do. I genuinely love dropping mines everywhere.
yeah,
That's part of my repertoire.
sure.
But there is something really satisfying and fun about just like walking across the map and thinking, I've got this. The
Yeah,
like opponent's dead. I'm going to crush him.
yeah.
And
Okay.
it's also kind of weird because it's like going back to Sim City games in a way. Um,
Yeah,
where you're trying to set up and like not go, or I guess whatever the opposite of not going broke is in a Sim City game.
yeah,
But yeah, it's just a different type of fun, I would say.
yeah. Well, I also think that this sort of stuff, like once you get this down again, then it opens the door again for the flashiness to kind of slowly poke its way back in, right? And you still have to be aware of those core fundamentals, but it gives you more room, you know? And again, I think in StarCraft there's a lot of choices you have to make about what resources you're going to use towards your improvement. Um, and even if you're in Diamond and you think you're cool, I think I'm cool way more than I should. But even when you think you're really cool, there's still stuff where it's like, yeah, just you need more drones. Like you're doing cool stuff, or you're this looks cool and this may or may not win a game for you. I'm sure that for every game where you lost because you're doing fancy stuff, you probably won one or two because of the flashiness. But it's not reliable in the same way as these boring fundamental skills are, but you need both. You can't have one and not the other. That's the rub.
Yeah, it's weird in a way because, every single person who coaches on Twitch, Lambo, Winter, Loco, Hearthstone, I mean literally anybody who coaches, you always see them screaming at diamond players about doing the flashy stuff when they're not. And like,
Yeah.
you see a Protoss who has like two oracles and they're just zapping drones, zapping drones, and they've been supply blocked for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's almost it is weird in a way that I just haven't picked that up yet, and it's just like, oh, when my friend pointed out, it was almost like it was a it's like a coming to God moment. It's just like, oh wow, what?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a pretty classic Diamond thing too, because like you get to Diamond, like you're pretty okay. Like you're pretty okay, and you can execute a lot of different things, but then it's like you try to start doing these things you want to execute at the expense of other things, and that's when it starts to be a problem. And um, I think we've all been there. I know I
Yeah,
have.
there's a difference between replacing the macro cycles you need and integrating the flashy stuff into the macro cycles that we all struggle with. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that it's going better. And you have a new set of priorities, which I mean, I should hopefully you'll see a bump in your performance and all of that as well. But that's good to hear. You want to go into highlights and lowlights?
yeah, so let me actually pull these up real quick because I saved them on SC2 replay stats specifically for this moment.
Ooh, ooh, details.
Yeah, so the first game, I'll go ahead and do the highlight first because in all honesty, I'm proud of both of these games. I'm actually proud about both of these games, but
That's good.
the first game, the highlight was a TVZ, and it was on Beckett Industries, so I was already a little bit nervous. But
Sure.
I had already started doing like this kind of return to the basics thing, and I was just macroing up. I did a little bit of scouting. I realized this is going to be a roach pressure build, so I need to be ready for that. Now, I did make a mistake in this game, and I moved out too early and literally ran into his roach pressure and just started
Yep.
losing tanks. And there was a moment in there, it's just like, I have to be flashy right now. And actually wound up saving tanks because of it. Like I hot pickup with the medevacs as they were being targeted down, pick them up, scoot them behind lines, and then set them up. So I was really ecstatic because I was making the macro work. I was doing a little bit of flashy stuff. I was allowing myself that, and I just stomped this dude's pressure.
Nice.
Um, I struggled a little bit in the mid game trying to put damage on and finding good positions, which, Beckett's pretty good for tank positioning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, we kept going. I finally kind of got an edge. I finally hit that max out point where I can dedicate my entire existence to splitting these Marines against
Yeah. Yeah.
Banelings.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I actually managed to shut him down. And I was pretty excited. I noticed he was unranked when I played him. So I was like, out of just a little bit of curiosity, I'm just like, I wonder what this guy is. It was a 3.9 Diamond 1 Zerg.
Nice.
I was so excited about that game.
That's
It
awesome.
actually, yeah, it refueled, like, I have this goal of trying to make Diamond 1 by the end of the year. And I just like, that reignited that passion to like, just keep practicing and actually make that goal.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it speaks a lot to when you can pull off these wins with less than perfect situations, because I think it's one of these skills as a player where it's like it's not as cool as some of the other micro skills or the big scary macro, but it's like knowing the priorities in a landscape that is like shifting and potentially not in your favor at all is really challenging in this game. Like, I mean, just think about how many times in a game you ask yourself, am I ahead or behind? Right? You have to have that thought like every 10 seconds when you're playing. And it's very challenging, but hey man, good for you for locking that one down and getting your focus in there and smashing some bugs. Good stuff, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. So for the let's see, the low lights. Originally, I had a game. It was a 35-minute game versus a another Diamond One Protoss. Um, I decided not to share that one because that one was abhorrently frustrating to me.
Sure.
Um, So I'll share a different TVP against the Diamond 1 Protoss that I lost. Um, it was one of those matches where they walk across the map and just kill you.
Yeah.
And it was one of those games like I thought I had a good setup and I was just like, man, I'm gonna get so like he's gonna walk into my tank line. I'm going to destroy him. Like I'm going
Yeah.
to crush him. And he walked up to me and slapped the crap out of me. Like it wasn't even a challenge. Like he kicked the crap out of me.
Yeah.
So I went back into the game and realized like I thought I had like a 5 tank line at the time. I had 2 tanks and a dream.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a miscalculation of how much stuff I had and a miscalculation on, you know, how far ahead I was. Cause I mean, I just was not.
Yeah. Did you have like a you had a good read that you were going to be pushed, right? Is that what you're saying?
I had a decent read. Yeah. I kind of saw his army starting to move across the map. I had just attacked him and I was falling back because I realized he had more stuff in front of shield batteries. So I was just like, I'll just fall back and defend. It's fine.
Yeah.
Um, I fell back to, the typical Terran third base location behind all the shrubbery. I had, some lookouts just in case he tries to like sneak up behind those bushes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he just walked around and just smashed everything I had.
Yeah. I mean, it's always I don't know. I've run into this where you know it's coming and you imagine that you are ready and then it arrives much scarier than you imagined or you are not as prepared as you thought you were necessarily. Um, and I know I get really frustrated on those because I'm like, I had the read, I had the information, I had the knowledge, and yet I'm dead.
Yeah, there's those are incredibly those can be frustrating games because, it's you're having to face the fact that you made a mistake and you thought you knew everything and you kind of have like this arrogant uh feel to it. It's just like I should have won this, like I had the read, I had what I needed. But if you go back into the replay, that's just not the case. It's just not the case.
Yeah, well, and I think it also kind of illuminates that like having the read is one thing, but having the execution to act upon it makes a big difference. And sometimes that difference is getting the read, 20 seconds earlier, or it's getting a follow-up read that like reconfirms it. Because I know I've had it where I get a read on it, and then I'm prepared, but then like the unit comp has changed from what I kind of thought it was, you know? This happens to me in ZVP sometimes where it's like they're doing a 2 base all in, but then they like added in Archons, and I'm like, well, I just made Roach Ling Ravager to fight this, and now my Lings are just gonna evaporate. And so it's like, there goes 20 larvae that I could have made. And it's like, well, we were kind of ready, but we kind of missed some details, and it's both. It's the execution and it's the read, and
Yeah.
sometimes they don't sync up. What
Yeah,
what would you kind of change if you had the chance in that situation?
I think I probably would have tried. I think poking with a smaller amount of units instead of just trying to push across the map and kill him would have been a good call.
Yeah.
Um, I probably stayed a little bit too long at his third base trying to fight into shield batteries, and that's always a no-no. You never do
Yep.
you never do that,
Rule
especially
one
if
of
he
shield
has
batteries.
yeah, especially if he has a super battery like queued up and ready to go. Like that's yeah, you don't try and fight into that. Even if you could I've had games where I would send 5 marauders up a ramp to fight one stalker and those batteries will keep that stalker alive and it's like it's so frustrating. This isn't a balance wine about the shield battery. I just want to make that clear. It's just a fact that you have to respect the battery.
Yes. You must respect that stationary building quite a bit.
Yep.
I think what is it? It's like 4 Archons worth of shields if it's like fully like the full duration. So
I think it
it's a
is,
lot.
yeah.
It's a lot of chunkiness to cut through, and I think we've all been there. And that's a universal thing, Protoss included.
It's the reason I cannon rush in PvP.
Oh yeah. Well, that's good to hear. You got anything else to add about your recent ladder escapades?
Not really. I'm fairly happy with where I am. I'm still climbing up, and one day we'll hit that diamond one.
That's good. I'm glad to hear of that goal. I think you can do it. I believe in you. I'm rooting for you. So, good stuff, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, I'm going to go ahead and turn the question around onto you, my friend. How is the ladder treating you?
Uh, it's pretty good. Again, I think this is my answer for everything. Pretty good. I,
Yeah,
I will, I
four
will,
episodes in a row.
I will mention. Well, here's the thing. I had a good day. I had a pretty good day yesterday, so that one's really fresh in my mind. Um, I had a pretty good day yesterday, but like last week, I had a day where I was the most tilted I've been in a long time. So like it's it's always a challenge, and um, I don't know, man. I like I said, I haven't been tilted like that in a while, but I felt it. Like I was really on the edge, and even though I feel pretty confident in my ability to manage the tilt and my ability to kind of deal with it, there's still days, man, where the tilt is relentless. And at a certain point, you just gotta kind of, tip your cap and be like, "Yep, well, it happened."
Yeah, I
Um,
definitely know those days that you're talking about. Was there anything that was causing the tilt? Is it just a bad day or?
Oh, I'll give you the whole rundown because I mean how I get there I think is important for it. But I started the day off okay. I was a little sleep deprived, which again it happens, but y- it's definitely a factor into this continuation of this kind of snowball effect, you know. So I started off a little out of it, and then it kind of comes down to like how I lost the games that I started with where I felt like a lot of the games, I can only really remember one that really sticks out in my mind, but um, a lot of the games, I look at my opponent's build and I'm like, how did I let him do this? You know, like this is so silly and so obscene to me. I can't believe that I like let this happen. Um, and it's one of those where I had a guy who made like six geysers and a layer with no units and just went straight to Spire. And and I I was and I looked at it and I'm like, how is the mute count so high already? Like it didn't make sense, you know, and like a lot of times in ZVZ there's kind of the tempo to like the first mutas come out and you can kind of push them back with queens and spores. And then if the muta count keeps going up, then you have to start doing different things to respond to it. But like the first wave of mutas like came out and killed my queens. And I'm like, yeah, I really needed those. Like not only for that step, but also for the next step. And then just looking at the build at the rewind, I was floored. I was floored at the audacity of the build that my opponent did. Um, and it's always for me when I get tilted, it's always when I look at my opponent and I'm like, why? You know, or I question the decision making of my opponent because they do something that I consider to be lesser or foolish or uh, extremely bold, as I would say. Uh, so that kind of started, and then like as the games progressed, I just kept making like arbitrary calls in my games, you know? Um, I think I was talking about this last week where I felt really cool and decisive and like every decision I made was like strong because I saw something or because I noticed something. But like this was the complete opposite, where it's like I'm just making drones just because I'm like, I think I can get away with it. And it's like, no, you can't. You just made them. Like and it's this weird thing where it's like it felt like I was kind of at the mercy of my own autopilot because I was doing stuff and I was doing stuff quickly, but I was doing it without a single thought in my head. Uh, which is not a great way to play StarCraft. You can get away with it certainly many days, and I've had whole streams where I don't have a single thought and I can still win tons of games. But there's many situations in this game where if you play like that, you will get punished, and a lot of that has to do with just the randomness of the ladder and the chaos that ensues. But it was rough, man, and um, it, I could tell I was already on the road because I was going to the BRB screen like every in between every game because I was like I can't sit here. I need to like I need to leave this chair to process what just happened to me. Um, and it was rough, man. It was a rough day. The show must go on at a certain point, and that's part of streaming too. But um, it was rough, man. And it's been a while since I've been that in there.
It's funny that you say that because I had a night a lot like that, and I can 100% empathize with what you're saying. The same 35-minute TVP. I was I was so done. I at that point I admit I was rage queuing. I was
Yeah,
furious, and I like it's always that first game, and then you start just making either arbitrary or just wrong calls,
yeah.
and it can be like it can affect your mindset when you start to ladder.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the most challenging things is I was looking at my replay and I'm like, why did I do this? Like, what compelled me to make this decision? And the reality of it, I'm asking myself this, right? And I'm like, the only explanation I have is that I had no thought at all when I did it. I just did it. And you just gotta live with the consequences. But like it's just hilarious to me too sometimes when I'm like, it's the whole like, who's in charge here? Who did this? And it's like, oh shit, it's me. Oh shit, it's me. I'm the manager and the director and whatever. And it's like I just couldn't reason with it, and you can't I can't explain it. I can't be like, "Oh, I saw this, so I overreacted and did this." No, I didn't think anything. Um and oh yeah, and here's another thing I'll mention too. I knew I was really tilted too, because I won a game like randomly through this sequence and I felt nothing. I won a game. I won a game, and I was like, "Yeah, we shouldn't have won that game. We should have lost that game 10 minutes
Oh
ago."
my
Like,
god, I know that feeling. I know that feeling.
yeah, and it's brutal because like normally I'm like, "Yeah, oh hey, hey, we did a good attack or whatever." Like I can pat myself on the back, whatever. I think it's good practice to do that sort of stuff. But I won that game, and I was like, "There's no way in hell my opponent should have let me do that." Like there's no way I should have been able to do this, and I did it, and I won. So like, cool. But I was not happy with it because I just knew that I won from a mistake that my opponent made, right? I won from an opportunity that should not have been given to me by my opponent, but was. So hey, I won. But yeah, that feeling of like, oh, I won, but did I really deserve it? It's brutal. It's brutal, but yeah, I've had it before, and I'll probably have it again.
Yeah, it's a really it's so weird to come out of a StarCraft 2 game winning and still feel defeated about it.
Yes.
It's a bizarre feeling. If you've ever experienced it, it's just like maybe I should probably take a break for the rest of the night, or like get up and like grab a drink of water, do some light aerobics or something like that.
Yeah.
Just because you got to get that out of your system. So
Yeah.
something I do want to ask, I'll ask this one last question and we can get away from like all the tilt and all that kind of crap.
Sure.
But how did you feel after that session, and what did you kind of do to like bring yourself back to a more normal level? Because this is something I've been more curious about with other players, is like how they bring themselves back kind of down to normal if they have like a rough night.
Yeah. So I'll give you the whole rundown. So like when I first started, like even 2 or 3 games in to my stream, I was kind of already feeling it. And again, a lot of it had to do with like how the games played out, which I don't really remember off the top of my head, but how they played out and how I responded to what my opponent was doing just felt really subpar. Um, And so I was going to a lot of BRB screens. I was walking around in between the games. That's usually my go-to, and that usually is honestly very effective for me. Like it helps me so much. Uh, Even when I just take a lap. I take a lap around and then I come back and I can hit rewind and I can actually like do analysis because I can't do analysis before that. It's impossible. Um, or I just actually it's not impossible. I do sometimes do the quick rewind where it's like I just look at the drone count and then I look at my drone count and then I'm like, all right, I'll be right back, and then I take the leap. But so like that's my go-to, and honestly, that's very effective. But it got to a point, and the one thing I will say about the whole like winning and feeling nothing thing, that illuminated where it's like, oh, okay, it's me. Like nothing's changed about the ladder or my opponents. It's me. Because when that happens, it's very illuminating in the way where it's telling me that it's like no, it's my thoughts that are being overly negative and overly uh self-destructive, you know? Um and honestly, what I really ended up doing is I stopped playing and I started watching YouTube videos on my stream. We watched a lot of cool space stuff. It was fun. It was whatever. But it had nothing to do with StarCraft, but enjoyable. And I think maybe I played like one or two games after that, after I watched YouTube videos for like a good like 30, 40 minutes. We went back in. I played one or two games. It was okay, and I was like, I'm still too tired. So that's kind of how I dealt with it. As far as like after that and everything, like I don't know, man. I think just having the stream, like having a camera not be on my face is always just the best for calming down. After that, I can, do whatever and play some mindless, boring game or something like that. That's really what helps. A game where I don't have to think is it's the best.
Yeah, I've it's like every time I end my stream, I go outside, I like take a deep breath of air, and then come back inside, play something like Mass Effect or it's
Yeah.
just something that's not StarCraft. But
Yes.
yeah, I that's something similar to what I do. Excuse me. I One of my roommates actually got a pull up bar recently, and that's probably how I've been getting. I've started regaining bicep muscles just because I get
Nice.
tilted and then walk out and then start doing
Nice.
pull ups on that pull up bar. But yeah, I mean, it really even like for starters, if you're a new streamer, never feel like you have to sit there for like 2 hours at a time and not take a break, and you have to constantly be playing games. I mean, it's I wouldn't say that's really necessary. Like if you're feeling tilted, like you should definitely like get that energy out in some way. That's not StarCraft because you're going to go in and make more bad mistakes and get more tilted and go into this vicious cycle. But yeah, I mean, feel free like never feel like you can't like just get up and walk around, especially if you notice you're rage queuing. Just you gotta take just a short little break, a little breather, take a walk, and then come back or probably come back to replays. Honestly, like you said, Dan.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like I'm pretty lax about like the requeuing. Like I'm never a guy who just leaves a game and is like, yeah, let's do another one. I need to like fully reset in a way. It's so like I joke around where it's like, yeah, my requeue time is probably anywhere from like a minute to like 12 minutes, like depending on like what I feel like talking about or like if I like sometimes I'll want to actually like if it's a really intense game or it's a game where I feel like there was a lot of push and pull and a lot of back and forth. I will watch every segment of that replay. Like okay, I was ahead here, I made this decision here. Okay, I was behind here, I made this decision here because I think each one of those decisions kind of exists in its own little bubble. But then there's others where it's just like, oh yeah, this is how many workers he had when he pushed me, and then he killed me. All right, that's all I like. The game might go on for another 10 minutes, but like that's as much analysis as I need to do on those ones. Um, but it's sometimes I don't know, man. Sometimes you feel like you're up for this analysis, and sometimes I am not up for it, and I have no taste for it.
Yeah, definitely. For me, it's either we are just like going hard into it. Like we're constant, like we're trying to constantly queue into new matches.
Yes, I think
Or
you
I,
have a faster I think you have a faster tempo for your queuing, I would say. It's just an observation.
yeah, I mean, there are times when I should not be that fast. I mean, like if I'm in the zone and I'm, I'm doing
Yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah.
like yeah, like I'll keep queuing. But there are some times when I'm just like, I cannot believe the shit that just happened. I'm queuing back up, and
Yeah,
I need to just like pay one of my roommates to come in and just like drag my chair away, and then
yeah.
put the BRB up screen.
Yeah. No, I think it's funny because you mentioned it too, where it's like if you're vibing and you're like in a tempo, yeah, man, just keep clicking that thing, man. We're grooving, but there's a difference between being grooving and chilling and also being like, screw this last game. I need a new one. Like the, it's the same, but it's different. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just I don't know. And it's funny for me because a quick queue for me would be like a minute. I would still wait like a minute before I get in there. Like I'm still gonna talk for a while before I get in it, but I don't know. Maybe I should try the tempo. Maybe I should maybe I should try a tempo play, and just
It's actually funny because I was about to say like maybe I need to try your route and just like take a couple of like just take a couple of minutes and talk with chat for a little bit.
yeah.
Watch a
Well, why
YouTube
don't we
video.
switch?
Why
Yeah,
don't
we'll
we
switch
switch?
methods
Yeah,
and then we'll revisit it and see how it goes. I don't
yeah,
know. We'll see.
yeah. We'll swap for a little while and see what happens. All right, man. Anything else you want to share? Like your highlights, your lowlights, anything else from the ladder that?
Um, yeah, I don't know. It's this is also another thing I just feel like talking about, but my ZVP has gotten so much better. I'm getting so good at queen walking people.
Oh, nice.
I like yesterday. This is also the thing yesterday where I felt like I had a good day. I crushed like four different Protosses with a queen walk, and they were all different, and they all had their own little quirks and subtleties about their defensive setup and all this stuff. But I've been smashing them, and it's very satisfying. But it also has led to my so last season my ZVP was like 34%, real, not fantastic. Um, but right now it's 51%. So I'm very happy about that. And I feel good about it. And then my ZVZ, which has almost always been like dead 50%, is at 40%. So now I'm like, okay, well, we gotta kind of look at the ZVZ. And I've been comfortable in ZVZ, almost overconfident maybe because and I also think this has to do with the fact that I was 34% ZVP, so my MMR was a little lower. So when I played ZVZ at the level I was at, I would be doing very well against other people because my ZVZ would. But now my ZVZ is like lagging because the other one is caught up. So it's this whole weird thing, but it's probably the macro.
Yeah, I mean, well, we do have to take the wins when we get them. So congratulations on improving your ZVP. I know that's been a bit of a sticking point for you for a while. So it's pretty heartening to hear that you're above that 50% line. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things I checked yesterday and I was just like, "Oh, wow, that's cool." My builds are very straightforward and not the most depth. Like I make 38 drones, I make five queens and let's go, but I'm getting a lot comfortable at executing it and getting the read on it and all that. So it's good and I'm happy about it. That's just a general ladder thing. I'll hop into the highlight and the low light. Um, so the highlight I had was a ZVZ that I played on the ladder. It was 2,000 atmospheres, a big map, and I opened with a very aggressive Ling opener, and it got pretty weird. Uh, like from that opener, it was very committed. So um, I have to do damage, and not only I have to go for the throat, and I it took a lot of attempts because again, when you do some of these early pools, you put yourself behind. So not only do you have to do damage, you have to do more damage than you would normally want. You have to do enough damage to basically reset them below what you already reset yourself to, right? So there's a lot of emphasis on that. And it took a couple attempts. The first few did not go as well, but the next one or two actually had some better results, and um, I was able to even it out and be in a good enough spot to basically expand and play it out like a normal game. I didn't really know this in until I looked at the replay, but when I looked at the replay, it's one of these things where it's like I was behind for the entire early game, but then once I got the damage in, um, it was even, and we both had like 9 drones and 1.5 bases. Like it's weird, and when you start a game with that, it really just changes the whole rest of the game because everyone's timing is thrown off, everyone's expectations is thrown off. So um, you're also doing a lot of guessing about your position and whether you did quote unquote enough. Um, so as the game kind of progresses, it's still kind of weird for me to determine whether I'm ahead or behind, and uh, I don't know what my opponent knows, and they are probably asking the same things as well, right? And um, as the game kind of developed, like I did more pressure, like I did more Ling Bane pressure, like at what would at what would be a normal time for Ling Bing pressure, but it's been pushed back 2.5 minutes because of the opener. But I was able to do what I wanted to do with that because I was like, I need to see if I'm ahead or behind. I need to force units out so that my opponent does not have just freedom to drone. So I'm like, yeah, let's attack. Let's make some Banes. Like let's put the pressure on because it'll give me the information and it'll force my opponent to respect me. Because again, I didn't know if I was ahead or behind. Um, I think in the replay I was actually a little behind, so it was actually kind of a really good call because if I droned and my opponent was able to drone and would have droned more, I would have been really really bad. So the unit forcing out was really good. It was really incredible, and then from this we kind of go like we've reached the third stage in a very delayed manner, and it gets into the roach on roach action, um, and uh, I put down a spire just as a I think I can do this. Again, I'm still kind of guessing. Like I don't know. I don't know if I'm really far behind or really far ahead. I think it's pretty even. I have a good reason that it's fairly even, but I'm also concerned about like I saw my opponent's roach army and I was like, that's a lot. I think I've put down the spire before I saw it, but I saw it and I was already kind of worried. But I was like, the spire might play out. It might work out. Anyways, I get pushed with roaches. I have 8 mutas pop out. There's a way more on the ground for my opponent, so my the roaches just slam through my first 2 bases. I pull the drones at the net. I'm fighting with like the small amount of roaches. The mutas are tickling the ravagers. They're getting value, but it takes some time. It takes some time for them to kill everything. I had a little bit of static D maybe, but like it just uh it didn't look good. And there were roaches up my natural ramp. They were in my main, killing my drones. I lost all the drones at my net, but eventually the mutas do clean everything up. And great. Oh, also I lost the spire in the main. The roaches, there were enough roaches to just walk up my ramp and kill the spire that I put behind my main mineral line. So like, okay, the spire's dead. I have the mutas. I don't need more of them. I mean, that's what I decided. I was planning on going back into Roach anyway, so it kind of worked out. But I'm like, all right, well, let's poke with the mutas. Let's dance around. Let's clean up the OVs. That's all I can do. Take the low hanging fruit. And from this, I start pushing with roaches, and I dump a lot of gas into Ravagers, which is kind of a YOLO play. Like it's a kind of committed. It's a commitment, and it's a lot of gas. I also had a lot of gas because I couldn't make mutas anyway, so whatever. Um, and I start fighting with Roach Ravager, and my opponent, doing the correct things, has spored up and has started to make Hydras. Um, but just based on the aggression that I was able to put on, I was able to hit at a timing where the Hydras were not not in great enough number. Unupgraded Hydras, low Hydra count, Roach Ravager just kind of smashes through, and it's one of these really delicate timing things where if they have enough Roach, you still lose, you know, and you also invested a lot into Ravagers, um, and it took me like two waves to really get in there. But again, you're picking off Hydras, you're picking off more expensive units. My mutas are kind of still alive and kind of doing stuff, but they're really just kind of being annoying with my other army, and it's the army on the ground that's doing everything. And with a couple more Ravager morphs and a couple more reinforces of roaches, I was able to pull it out, and it was uh, it was like a 17-minute game, but
Oh
fantastic.
man,
I was very
I
happy with it.
I don't
It was
even know how
very
you.
very mudslinging, but I'm glad.
Yeah, I don't even know how you start breaking down a game like that. I just we started with 12 and somehow ended up with 9 drones apiece. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's pretty classic ZVZ, but it's also like the thing about aggression in ZVZ is that even if you don't do anything, you have to do it to get units made from your opponent. And I felt very good about my decisions, even when I knew I wasn't doing anything, because um, I was just aware that my opponent, just because of my opener, my opponent had an ability to just sit back and make nothing but drones. So making the choice to hurt my already bad economy a little bit more to go across the map and get a little bit of control, it makes a big difference. And again, it's one of these kind of calls you have to make on the fly, and I was very happy with my decision there. And each decision I made was like, I don't know, man, like isolated in its own set of circumstances because the circumstances kept changing, right? So like, but each one I made felt right for the moment, and it worked out, I guess, surprisingly.
yeah, that's fantastic, man. So I did want to ask real quick. Whenever you're transitioning from mutas back into Roach Ravager, was that how was the best way to phrase this? Did you consciously make that decision, or did you feel like that was your only choice left?
Kind of both. Like I'm not a big fan of like the mass muta in ZVZ, and especially when you're playing an opponent who already has a three base setup with spores and queens. Like mass muta is fine, but you have to kind of damage your opponent, and then you can get that insane amount of mutas that actually like can kill spores and buildings and all that. Um, but I'm not a huge fan of that because if you're playing a good Zerg, that good Zerg will say, "Oh, it's mass muta. All right, well, time to get a fourth, never leave my base, get Vipers and Lurkers, and I will walk across the map and win." Right? That's it. I mean, it's complicated because you got to get Hive Tech and you got to still have a good spread, and um, there's usually Banelings involved, but I did not have Baneling Tech at all in that game, so like that's a non-factor for me. But if they know how to take those steps, mass muta is not very good. It is good in Diamond, especially because it spirals and it snowballs and it's annoying. But it's never like I'm also this is also just a me kind of thing, I think, where I'm I like the accessory spire, the spire that's there, spire that gives you vision, map control, and air presence but is not the key to you winning the game. And that's usually how I approach spires in ZVZ. I think it's a better as a utility. It's expensive, and the mutas are expensive. But it's something you can get away with if you're really far ahead, or if you know that like your opponent is super committed to Roach Ravager on the ground, because then you can squeeze out a lot more value from the mutas. And my spire died, so in a way, I was forced into it, but I was kind of probably going to do that anyways. I don't foresee a world where I would have been like, yeah, Mass Muta is the ticket for me to win this game because I don't think it's that good. And I like Roach Muta. I think it's fun and exciting, and it's just it fits with me. Yeah.
Yeah, poor opponent actually forced you into the choice you wanted to make. That's super
Yeah,
unfortunate for him.
I wish I could have not lost the Spire, but hey, it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that sounds like a pretty awesome game. I'm gonna have to actually go back and look at that one because that sounds like just a hell of a ZVZ, honestly.
Yeah, it was a good one. And then the low light, I kind of already mentioned this, but I think I can remember it. Like I played a ZVT without a single thought in my head. I, I I played a ZVT where it was bad decision after bad decision, and it I looked at the replay, and again, it's like why didn't I think of this, or why did I think this? And it's not even that exciting of a game, but it just it felt very painful just because of my mental state and like how I literally had no explanation for the actions that I did in the replay. You know, it's like watching a replay of someone else and you're like, why is this? But it's me. It's definitely me. Um, and it's like, you know, I did damage with the little roach pressure. Um, I had some good information on him, but then I just was like, yeah, I'm gonna make 55 drones. I think I can do that. And it's like, why do you think you can do that? I don't know. I'm just doing it. And then, you know, four tanks show up and a bunch of Marines, and I'm like, oh, we're dead. And again, this is kind of coming off of me last week, where it was like I was uh, I was confident and I was checking things and I was thorough and I was double checking things. And like all I needed to do was like send two lings to die at his natural, and I just would have been like, "Oh, that's too many Marines. Like, let's get ready," you know. But I just didn't. I just didn't. And again, I think it's this weird mix of like assumptions and also overconfidence in a way, because there are situations where I do get away with that kind of droning because I don't know, my opponent's making bunkers at his third for some reason. You know, it's something completely unrelated to me, but it's like I can get away with it. And I think that's a big diamond thing too, where it's like you ever run into a person on the ladder and you're like and like you kill him really quickly, you know, and then you look at your build and you're like, you know what? He probably gets away with this a lot.
Oh,
You
100%,
know, like
100%.
he probably does this all the time and it works because I know how other people would approach this, and like you can just see it. I can just see how another type of player would misread it and, you know, misplay into it. Um, but that's part of it. That's part of it.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. I've seen like TVTs where people open Marauders, and it's just like I'm gonna go kill you now. Like you have no idea how dead you
Yeah,
already are. But there's sometimes whenever you're having one of those off days, like you just kind of autopilot into. So well, sometimes it's like autopiloting into bad decisions. Sometimes you just kind of make the wrong decision because you feel frustrated and pressured into doing certain things. Like I've definitely had like TVPs where they open Stargate Phoenix, and I'm just autopilot into Mind Drop, and then wonder why all of my SCVs are dead, why the medevac never made it to
yeah,
the third, and why I
yeah,
now have no map pressure. um, you know, TVZs where it's just like I'm setting up for mines and it's suddenly roaches show up and I'm just like I saw that roach warren for 5 minutes. I don't understand.
yeah,
How did I make these decisions? It's it can be really frustrating, and it again, like I said before, it kind of goes into this vicious cycle of like you start making bad mistakes, you get frustrated, which causes you to make more bad mistakes. And even if you're like autopiloting, it's not really autopiloting because you're still frustrated and making mistakes during that autopiloting.
yeah.
So
Well, I
yeah.
think it's this weird like it's a weird thing where it's like I feel like I'm at the mercy of my autopilot, you know? Like I'm out of control of it. But it's also like in StarCraft there's a lot of things you should have automated. You know, like there's a million things in this game that like you if you don't have to think about it, good job. That means you're doing it correctly, you know? But there are other things where if you make assumptions, you run into bad times. And again, it's I think it's that lack of control of my own decision making that kind of just drove me crazy, you know?
Yeah, definitely. There's it is kind of like autopilot for sure. um but you do have to hit those like decision nodes, and then
Yes.
make a choice. You come off of autopilot to make those decisions and then back to autopilot.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just, like, if you're too frustrated with ladder, it's just faulty decision making.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it happens. It'll happen again.
it, it it's going to continue happening until we hit like top 10 GM.
I think they do it as much as we do.
Probably, yeah. I'm sure Rainer every once in a while. I've seen Clem like make those dumb decisions of like, I've been there, I know
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's a pretty good segue if you want to dive into the MMR talk here.
Oh yeah, wow, nice catch.
I mean, hey, if we're talking about Clement Rayner, it's good, you know?
Yeah. So the topic tonight, guys, is going to be MMR, and this is an enormous topic that we can go into. There's so many implications that that little number can have, and it can frustrate you. It can make you just elated to be alive. I mean, this little number holds a surprising amount of control in our day-to-day ladder lives. So, Captain Happa, if you want to go ahead and open up with some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I mean every player has a relationship with their MMR, right? And um, their league too is tied into that, and I think a lot of players, uh, you know, you're proud of it, and you should be proud of it, and it's an accomplishment, and it's one of these things where um, I don't know, man. It's really it's like sometimes you just look at your MMR and it's in a good spot and you're just like, yeah. You just look at it and you smile because it's you feel like it's a value item, and it shows something, right? But I think we should talk about like how it exists. Like it exists to help you find players that are at your level, right? And it exists to establish this player is better than this player, and this player is better than this player, and up and up and up and up. And I think that's important, and I think that's also like it's very functional. Like finding, like it's not fun to play players who aren't your level in this game. It's in fact it's terrible. Like I do not recommend it at all. Um, but playing people within your ballpark is fantastic, and it's perfect for you as a player because it should be balanced in that way, skill wise. Um, the other thing I'll say is that I think a lot of the StarCraft uh, culture, mentality, whatever you want to call it, is skill. Skill is king, right? So like, if you're more skilled, you should win, right? Like if you are more skilled, you should always win, right? Um, if I was gonna play Cyril in 1,000 games, Cyril would win 1,000 times, right? Like there's no question. There's no question at all, right? But it's this kind of I think sometimes there's this weird like because skill is the thing and MMR equals skill, I think sometimes there's kind of this weird disconnect of like, oh, my MMR's trash, so I'm not skilled, or like, I don't know. Help me out here.
So, uh, I do agree with you. It is like it's a metric of where exactly you are in this moment. It's
Yes.
literally a representation of your wins and losses up to that point. And you can have days where, like, okay, just for example, I've had days where I can beat, people like Helium Bunny. I can beat D1 Zergs. I can turn around the next day and lose to like a Plat 1 Terran who cheesed me. It's it's not, I would say it's not the greatest way to measure your skill at the game, because you can be great at so many different things, and then you could, you play one bad game and they're going to take a little bit of MMR away from you. I mean, that's going to happen. But I personally feel like we probably tie a little bit too much emphasis on our MMR, honestly. I feel
Yeah.
like we hold that number too closely, and we're entirely too prideful of it. Because if you two things that are basically asked of every StarCraft player is what race do you play and what's your MMR? And
Yeah.
everybody has their MMR like they know their MMR. Like I
Yes.
if you ask me right now, I'd be like, yeah, 3.5 Terran, 3.2 Zerg, 3.3 Protoss. Like
Yeah.
it's something that we value very highly, and I don't think we should.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's I don't know, the scale of MMR, I think makes a big difference as well. Because a lot of times, like as a viewer and like as a fan, like when I'm watching like professionals, the difference between 6.4 and 6K is huge, right? It is ludicrously huge between those two numbers, right? And it's I don't know, man. It's just it's a framing of these like numerical differences, right? Um, or even if it's like a 200 MMR difference at the 6K level versus a 200 MMR difference at 3.6, right? That those 200 points at 3.6 is so ludicrously different than the 200 points at that level. It's kind of insane. And I think just because numerically they're the same, people think that like, oh, I'm 3.8, I crush 3.6 players. And it's like, well, I mean, like 3.6 players can definitely rough you up in a bunch of different situations. Like no question, like it can be a pretty fair fight in a lot of situations. Granted, the 3.8 player might win more often, but it's not the same as it is at the top end. And I think a lot of the discussions we have are very specific to the top end, and a lot of the anxieties and like frustrations we feel are on the low end, right? Because it's different. It's like an exponential kind of growth thing.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, and I think that's why it stings even more whenever we like start to lose MMR,
Yes.
because I've definitely been in the position where I've lost like 200 MMR over 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and it hurts. It hurts so bad if especially if you let it just sucks.
Oh yeah.
And
Definitely.
it's not quite the same as like the top GM losing 200 points. They like at that point like they're dropping down and they'll be lucky to get like 8 points per match
Yeah.
if they win. So it's like it's not something that's really difficult to gain back at this level. Like
Yeah.
it's God, I can't even think of the word for it, but you're probably going to gain it back faster than a grandmaster player is going to gain theirs back. And I mean,
Oh yeah.
if you fall down a certain amount of MMR, you're still going to be playing fairly similar players. I mean, the moment you start dropping like from diamond 1 to like low diamond 3, like yeah, now you're definitely facing a different like league of opponents at that point.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like you said, like there are D3s that can definitely put a hurting on some like low D1 players. Like it's
Yeah.
it's really not that big of a gap.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is that like for a lot of people, like, plat, diamond, whatever, like you're like one good win streak away from ranking up, right? Like a solid like, 10 or 11 games and you can rank up. Like that's not a lot, you know? And the fact that sometimes getting those 10 games can take you months to years, like that shows you that it's actually doing its job of measuring your like legitimate skills in many different situations, in many different circumstances, right? And it's just like I don't know, man. When I break through like a league and I notice a difference in the player, I'm like, oh yeah, and this MMR stuff, this 4K player feels a lot better than my other 3K opponent, you know? And, I think that that's good that it can measure that pretty accurately and also just helpful for the ladder to exist. Um, uh, oh, I just had a thought, but I think I lost it. Oh, yeah, no, this is what I was going to say. I think it's important to recognize the MMR ceiling and also the MMR floor, right? Because I think both of them are important for gauging you as a player. And yeah, everyone loves the ceiling, you know. Oh, my highest MMR was this. Mine was 4009. All right. I remember that number. I will continue to remember that number. It's a big deal to me. All right. 4009 was the highest I've ever been. All right. Um, but I think the ceiling, I mean, the floor is going to be a better measure of like your inherent skill, right? Or your, practiced skill, whatever you want to call it. And I've certainly had this where I tank a lot of MMR and I start playing people in the league below me and I play really bad and I win. And that's also one of these things where it's like, oh yeah, it's not that fun when they're just not as good. Like it's not as fun to play. Like you just have more, you walk over and you win, and like, hey, some people like that, but it's not as engaging, as someone who's willing to go toe to toe and really throw some hands back at you and all that. So um, the floor I think is hard to conceptualize sometimes for people because they're always thinking about the ceiling, right? They're always trying to get that peak, that tip top, that best MMR they've ever gotten, but I think it's really more important to think about the floor slowly climbing its way up. The ceiling might kind of jump up and down and kind of have its little dips and valleys and all that, but the floor hopefully is able to do this kind of slow monotonous kind of climb, right? And that's something that it took me a long time to kind of get that idea. It took me losing a lot of MMR repeatedly. Like I think I said this before, but like I've been 3-6 like 5 to 7 different times, like I've been 3-6 and then I've been not 3-6 and then I've been 3-6 again and then I've been 3-7 and then I've been not 3-6 again. And like each time I come back to 3-6, I am a much better player than I was the last time I was here, right? Even though, a week ago I might have been at 3-4 or whatever, I'm still better this time around at 3-6. And that's one of these things where it's this whole interaction, between performance and skill, right? And performance being win, loss, good, bad, and skill are very different, right? And there's not really a great way to measure both of them because they're both going to interact and kind of have an influence on it. But um, it's tough. It's tough to have a number, but it has to be there in a way. I don't know.
That's actually that's a fascinating concept, honestly. Like keeping track of your floor instead of your ceiling. I actually really like that idea because it does
Oh,
give you
good.
kind of it gives you a better indicator of like where you stand. Like your floor should be kind of creeping up, and you got to figure out like why is it not, like if you're still kind of like dipping down to 3.5 and you stay there forever, then you need to start asking yourself some hard questions like what do I need to do to make this floor start to kind of rise up. I feel like another kind of important metric to keep track of is probably also the range between the ceiling and the floor, and see how much that kind of fluctuates,
Sure.
because it could, at least for me, now that I'm thinking about it, like if you're kind of like an emotional player, you tend to have, high highs and low lows, and like, you'll have days where you're just salty and you're tilted and you're just like not having a good time. And you have some days where you're just like kicking the crap out of everybody on ladder. I feel like that's also a range that could kind of keep track of that mentality as you go through ladder, because like you just have these like really low lows, and then dip down to like 3.4, and then suddenly you're like 4K. And it'd probably be a good indicator to just like keep track of that and just be like, okay, clearly I'm having like really bad days, here, what can I do differently to make sure that the floor is coming up closer to the ceiling. um I feel like that would be something interesting to track. Maybe I might try and track that at some point.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of data there, right? That's the advantage of having a numerical value. Um, but I also think it's really important to just know that like the ceiling is going to be volatile, you know? The ceiling is going to be streaky. It's going to depend on the types of opponents you run into. It's going to depend on, the matchups you run into. If you're just really lopsided in your matchups and you just keep running into the one you're bad at, that's going to knock you down a couple pegs. Um, it doesn't mean you're a worse player. It just means you're a little unlucky this week, maybe, and um, again, I think with the ladder too, there's so many things in the ladder that you just don't have control over, you know? Yeah, you're gonna get proxy voided 6 games in a row. You can't prevent it. I mean, you can try your best. You can leave the game early if you want, but like it's brutal, It's you can only do so much. And I know it's a very frustrating place to be. Um, but the ceiling will, I don't know, it'll dip a lot. And that's the only number that they display to you. So you got to kind of live with it. This is another thing that I do to kind of deal with it and to kind of cope with it is this is so one of the things they tell you like in health classes and stuff, like if you're trying to lose weight, they say don't weigh yourself every day, right? Weigh yourself like once every 2 weeks. And I feel the same way about my MMR, where it's like I don't really look at it like game to game to game because I think that's bad, and I don't think it's productive to look at it game because it's gonna change, and you don't have a lot of control over that. I think it's better to look at it as a trend over time or as a more zoomed out looking at it. I joke around and say I only look at the first two numbers. The second two are meaningless to me because in a given day, 100 MMR, yeah, it could disappear in the blink of an eye, like, and it's something that I've just learned to be okay with and learned to accept as part of laddering because ladder is brutal and unforgiving in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a thought and it's just like completely left my mind there. Yeah, I do agree. Looking at it, because I tend to be the person to look at it day to day, and it's not healthy. I can promise all of you, it's not it's not healthy. I like even if I hit an unranked opponent, I will check their profile to see what rank they are, and it's
Yeah.
don't start doing it. Don't if you haven't started doing it, don't start doing it. And if you're doing it right now, it's take Dan's advice, please.
Here, here's
Take
here's a
Dan's advice.
here's a thought. If there was an option in Blizzard to hide it, would you hide it?
I would. I 100% would because I got to break myself of that. I don't.
I know a lot of other competitive games like have that where it's just not visible. And like you
Well,
get your league promotions and whatever, but like they don't actually show you the number.
that actually used to be the case in StarCraft a while back.
Yeah.
Your MMR was completely hidden. Um, but I think I would hide it again because
Yeah.
there's well, it is nice to see the number go up. Like it really is. It can feel rewarding. But
Sure.
at the same time, if you see the number starting to tick down, it can cause some tilt, and it's something I kind of want to avoid. So like, would I like to see it if I'm going up? Yeah, but I think it'd be more worth it if I just didn't see it at all and just like got a promotion whenever I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way about that. The red triangle,
That red
the
triangle.
you are at risk of demotion. And it's like, listen, Blizzard, I got 4 months left in the season. All right. Give me a shot. All right. Give me a shot. We're getting I get so annoyed at that little triangle because all it does is induce anxiety and apprehension, but it's like, yeah, look, I'm working on it. All right. There's a lot of angles to work on.
Just a quick tangent, but why did it have to be red? And why did there have to be an exclamation point in it?
I don't know. It's a very it's quite a distressing symbol. It
Yeah.
screams like alert, scary, impending doom. It has a lot of impending doom quality to it.
What?
Um
Yeah.
and that's my biggest gripe. It's just it doesn't need to be there. Like,
Why?
look, I
Yeah.
know
Why
I see
can't
the bar. I see the bar. I see that it's not going the other way. You know what I'm saying? Like I see the bar. I get it.
like if you're going to put anything there, can you just put like a loving note or something? Just like, hey, sport, I see you're struggling there a little bit. I believe in you. Keep it up. Like, put that in there, Blizzard. Damn.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's. it's there, and I'll learn to live with it. But I don't enjoy that triangle at all. I mean, and I've been seeing a lot of him lately because we're hovering on 3.9, 3.8 ish. So I'm literally yo-yoing between that, seeing it and not seeing it, or seeing that the bar of D1 be like 2 pixels filled, and then back down to the other one where it's red triangle land. It's a challenge, but we're surviving. I'm
It
getting
is.
used to him again.
Yeah, I'm still. I don't know. Since I've been, trying to dig myself out of a pit, I've also made friends with the red triangle of death,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's it really can be a bit demoralizing to see it like every time
Yeah.
you exit a game.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and I also think like even lower than us too. It's like in plat and gold, it serves even less of a purpose because like you can win 5 games in gold and get to the next league, you know? Like it's not a wide margin to get those rank ups, but no, it's still there in gold and gold 1 and all that, and it's like, it's just like my heart goes out to everyone who's stressed out by it. So, I empathize with that greatly.
yeah, it's an incredibly painful reminder that is completely unnecessary. I don't want to see it. I don't need to see it. Blizzard, if you're listening, take it out. Put the note in there
Yeah,
instead.
I'm I'm sure they're listening to this.
Yeah.
I'm sure that one computer left alone in a room is listening.
The one intern, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's the yeah, I mean, MMR can still be a useful tool though. Like
yeah,
I do think it could be a useful tool, but it's not just not something that I necessarily want to see day to day. Like send me an email in 2 weeks, please.
yeah, and I think it does do a good job of measuring the skill as a player. Oh, the one thing I thought is that like here's the thing for MMR that I think is kind of not present there. Where okay, I'm in Diamond 1, right? Barely, but I'm in there, right? But here's the thing. Am I personally a Diamond 1 player every day that I play, right? I would say no, I am not. I have glimmers of when I am definitely a Diamond 1 player, but am I a Diamond player 1 every day? No. Am I a Diamond 1 player like 50% of the time? Maybe. Depends on the matchup, depends on the map maybe, but like I think I can hang, but I am not solidly there. And this is something that, happened to me in Diamond 2 as well, where it's like I am Diamond 2 by MMR and rank, but I am not a Diamond 2 player every day. There's a big difference between being Diamond 2 and being Diamond 2 every day. And, I was Diamond 2 for months and months and months. And even on the worst days, I was a Diamond player. I was a Diamond 2 player every day. Like, and it took me a long time to get to that next level of being solidly in that league, even when I'm playing really bad and slumping a little bit. I'm still solidly in that league. Um, and it's again, it's a we're trying to measure something that changes slowly over time, but we're trying to measure it with day-to-day input and feedback, right? Which I don't think is necessarily the best way to do it, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. There are some people who like they'll hit the little sliver into Diamond One, and they'll just immediately want to say, like I'm a Diamond One player. And I'm like, yeah, go ahead and do that. Like you should definitely celebrate whatever you can get in this and what can be a cruel game. But
Yeah,
I kind of feel the same way. Like even the first time that I hit Diamond 2 for a while, I was a little bit hesitant to tell people I was Diamond 2 because I did not feel like I was Diamond 2. And like,
yeah,
my MMR would slip in and out, in and out, in and out constantly. And I felt like maybe I'm just more of a Diamond 3 player. I'd even say now I'm probably a Diamond 3 player, but it's, yeah, it is a good point. Let's, you know, like you may have the badge, but you may not quite be there. You may not quite have the skills to like, play in that range all the time, every day.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well, I
yeah,
also think it has to do with how we segment the leagues, as like these. big divisions, these big sequential steps, like 90-degree turns of steps going up, but it's not. It's a very gradual kind of thing, and it's a very gentle slope sometimes. And again, hey, if you're in gold and you get your promotion to plat, like hell yeah, dude, like that's an accomplishment, like celebrate it for sure. But also know that like you might oscillate between gold 1 and plat 3 for a while. I know I did.
Exactly.
Um, and it's also kind of a routine for me at this point where it's like I get a promotion, time to slump, time to slump and feel bad and not perform as well as I'd like to, and then eventually begin that really kind of gradual, slow churn up, hopefully, right? Like, um, so again, it's one of these things where it's like, yeah, like be proud that you've ranked up, but also understand that you still have to kind of claw your way through that rank, and that in itself is its whole other thing, and its own mountain to climb in a way, right? And like for me, that's my goal. That's my next goal in this game. My next goal in this game is to be a solid Diamond 1 player. You know, like right in the middle of the league, Diamond 1 every day, Diamond 1 when I'm slumping, a slightly higher Diamond 1 when I'm playing really well. Like that's the goal on the agenda for me for right now. And we'll worry about Masters 3 way later. Like I'm not going to touch that one for a while, but we'll one step at a time.
It's actually a pretty good point. Maybe I need to readjust my own goals to kind of reflect that.
Oh
But
yeah,
you
well
do.
this sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you do raise a very interesting point about that.
Yeah, this is another thing that I think is just kind of goal setting stuff. I don't know if I've said this before, but I do not like MMR focused goals, right? I think it's really bad, and I think it's unproductive for your mentality and your improvement, right? Because if you're like, all right, I'm gonna hit 4K today, like I don't, you don't have control over that.
You could get cheesed, 12 times in a row and lose
Yeah,
every single one of them. I
yeah,
agree. There's too many variables to make MMR like a solid goal, especially if you're just for like one session. Like
yeah,
you could go and crush and you could hit 4K. You could get cheesed over and over again. You could get a wild assortment of different matchups and different all-ins, macro games, and all this. There's just too much to really account for, and there's a very high chance that you may wind up feeling dejected about that goal that you could not reach, when there's a chance it's not your fault.
yeah.
So yeah, I definitely agree. It's not great. It's
Yeah,
not a great way to.
because yeah, I mean, and I think one of the rules of goal setting is that it should be attainable and it should be realistic. Um, and like I like the I think it's good to be motivated to try to win, but I also think sometimes I think that that view of MMR is a little too zoomed out, because if you want to gain MMR, you really have to look at your decision making and your situational stuff like in the game that you're in, right? Because one game isn't going to get you the promotion. It's the culmination of many games over time, but it's the strengthening of those decisions and those choices, and also mechanics and making stuff and all that. Like it's all of that kind of coming together to hopefully translate into a win, which hopefully translates into MMR. So if you're just looking at just the MMR, I think you're losing a lot of the good focus on the game that you are supposed to be present in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
But yeah, that's just one of these things. Sometimes I see people being like, "I'm pushing to this MMR," and it's like, "Are you?" It's
Yeah,
scary.
I
So I just always avoid MMR related goals. I think it's good to have goals that are like, yeah, I want to hit this league by this time. Like I think that's fine as long as they're long term, and as long as it's like a trend over time, right? I think that's pretty solid.
Yeah, I actually did have to kind of shift my mindset from, like these kind of like tiny short term goals of just like I'm gonna jump 100 MMR, on these weeks, and instead kind of making it like a much longer term thing of just like, yeah, I want to be in Diamond One by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Um, I have slipped in. Unfortunately, I have slipped into. Every once in a while, it's just like, oh, I'm three. I'm 3.7. Can we hit 3.8K? And then immediately lose a ton of MMR,
Yeah.
and
It's
that can
dangerous
be.
sometimes like that.
It's so dangerous that you get so excited about it, and that little number is just like, yeah, maybe you can hit the next. You can go up 100 more. Come on, you can do it.
Yeah.
You get
Yeah. No,
cheesed.
I totally get that. And as soon as I start doing math on my MMR, I'm like, oh, we've looked at it. We've made eye contact with it for too long, too much. Because like even yesterday, like my MMR is pretty sitting pretty nice right now. I think it's like 3.8, 3.9. Um, so I was like, ooh, 4K? Like, and I'm doing math, and I'm like, no, 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 no math, no math. I know it's less than 100 distance away, but like, it's taking me out of the games, and um, I also think, just being a macro player, like a general macro guy, it's tough because you just got to deal with all sorts of shit. And how you deal with it is, if you know how to deal with it, you will get better at dealing with it. But it's also like, um, I don't know. This might be another episode, but it's like being macro is basically saying like, come at me, bro, to everything. Like everything, right? If I'm gonna be a macro Zerg, I am prepared to know how to shut down every dumb thing imaginable. And there are a million dumb things I have not imagined yet and have not even seen.
Yeah, it
So
really
it's
is.
a
You
challenge.
you really are just telling your opponent, "I'm in this for the long haul. I'm gonna kick your ass. I'm gonna kick your ass later on. Like, do whatever you want." And like, they throw like a cannon rush or something. You gotta sit there and
Yeah.
take it and just turn back to them and just say, "That's it. That's all you got." Oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna make you miserable.
Yeah. No, and it's funny too because at the MMR I'm at, I don't run into cannon rushes that much, or sometimes it's like the like half like gate and then forge, but rarely do I see the dedicated forge first cannon stuff. And when I do see it, I just crush it with drones. Like I'm just like, yeah, here's my drones. I'm gonna fight you and win, and like I just destroy it, and it's really satisfying. But it's also like that didn't happen to me before, but with enough reps of me crushing cannons with drones, I feel very confident about it. Even if um, hey, there's still games where I don't see it and it gets up and I'm like, well, I'll just leave. So I'll give it to him. But for every one of those, there's a couple that I'm able to shut down, and it's very satisfying. It's also just like it's a macro thing. I'm hatch gas pool in ZVP, so I should be able to shut that down with drones, and when I do, it's nice, feels nice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we could definitely wind up doing an entire episode on like macro, and I think even cheese as well, because I've definitely done a few cheeses in my lifetime, and it's actually surprising. Whenever we encounter a cheeser, we always want to be like, he didn't do anything. It's like, no,
Yeah.
and it's actually shocking. I was actually taught how to cannon rush by Aret, and I was actually blown away by the amount of skill and calculation it takes to actually
Yeah.
like properly pull it off and just destroy. But that could be like
Oh yeah.
that could be its own episode. Is that's
Oh
It's a
yeah.
fascinating topic, really.
No, well, I think there's a lot to be said about being a specialist versus a generalist,
Yeah,
right?
there.
And
Yeah,
like being a macro guy is basically saying like, yeah, I'm going to be capable of winning in all circumstances, right? Which is a lot. When you say all circumstances, that is infinity possibilities in this game. Like it's a vast thing, so, it will change your MMR, and just again in Diamond too. I still run into new shit all the time. I still run into stuff where I'm like, this is an interesting take. And it's experience. And I think that's also just a typical Diamond thing where a lot of it is being experienced in different situations. And um, which is why every time I've hit 3.6, I've had more experience. So I have more knowledge and I have more repetitions in those situations. So that's why I'm better every 3.6. I every time I crossed 3.6.
yeah, absolutely, man. All right, do you have anything else you want to add to the topic before we
I don't think
close it off
so.
for tonight?
I think I hit all my major points. I think just like in summary, like just think of your MMR as like a trend over time. Like
Yeah.
I don't think of it as like this number represents my play. It's also because that number is going to change a lot, and it could change a lot just based on one session, right? But one session of ladder does not equal your worth as a player, right? It's more, it's on a longer time frame, and I think that is the unifying idea that helps me deal with it because I know I will go up and down. It's given. I'm 100% okay with it going up and down. I know it's going to happen. It's going to always happen, and I think the sooner you can kind of accept that, I think that the better relationship you'll have with that number existing and staring at you all the time, you know?
Yeah. I mean, also keep in mind, like, I mean, you kind of fall within a range of MMRs, really. Like,
Yeah.
you could just as much punch up as get sucker punched by
Yeah.
somebody from beneath you. You know, you just have to keep in mind that, that number is just an indication of where you currently are right now.
Yeah.
And don't, like, if you see it slipping, don't let it affect you. You're just going back to the floor to bounce back up. And
Yeah.
I mean, as long as you're seeing a trend that's going up over time, I think you're going to be okay. I think you're going to be doing good.
Yeah. And you know, it's also this is a bonus thing, but like if you do competition and you do tournaments, you'd be surprised at how well you can play against players who are better than you.
Oh,
That's
100%.
certainly something I realized and have sometimes executed. And it's incredible. And I think that we can have I want to have a whole episode on like competition prep and
Yeah, I do
competition
too. I do
mentality
too.
and all that because there's a lot to go into. But um,
It's
yeah,
wildly different from the
no, you learn a lot about your MMR through that.
well, it's also different just because, MMR is like it's just a best of one. So you could just get cheesed even though you might be better, but we'll save that for another episode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So thank you guys so much for coming out. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Let me find that link for you really quickly. Yeah, I think that's the link. Definitely check out my friend Dan here. He is a fantastic guy. He helps me co-host this show, and he does a fantastic job. He sounds more coherent than I do for sure.
Now, Will, I won't have that negative self-talk here.
It's just a joke. I thank you so much for coming out, man. I really appreciate it. You can find his link tree there. It'll take you to all of the necessary links to subscribe and follow him in other areas. I, of course, have been Lord Cranial. This episode will be going up in podcast form next Wednesday. Again, I want to thank you all so much for listening. It means a lot to me. So yeah, good luck, have fun out there, and we'll see you on the ladder.